Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine, Taylor-Klaus, and Diane, Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults.
Hi everyone, Elaine and Diane here, and we know that you want your complex kids to grow up to be happy and independent, and yet you're not always sure how or when to help with that.
In this podcast, we'll encourage you to collaborate with all kinds of complex kids and support them in navigating life and learning.
And we'll interview leading experts from around the world, as well as parents in our own community, talking about how training for parents actually helps these complex kids.
We'll talk about the issues we hear parents struggling with all the time and how a coach approach can support and empower your amazing young people.
We won't tell you what to do. We're going to help you figure out how. So let's move on to the next conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Diane, will you welcome and introduce our guest, the next contestant?
I'm excited to introduce a new friend. So I met Susan Hoyer at the International ADHD Conference last fall, and she was talking about technology and kids and cyberbullying and sexting. And I just know that our audience has a lot of questions about kids and technology, and it was just really exciting. It's even in your title, aren't you? Like the director of something in technology, right?
Dean of Instructional Technology, yes.
There you go. Dean of Instructional Technology. So you've got the credentials, and we're just really excited to have you here. Why don't you start by talking a little bit about how you got into what you're doing? What's the backstory for how you got here?
Sure. So technically right now I'm the Dean of Instructional Technology and Culinary Arts. So I'm also the culinary teacher. So I wear many hats.
Because it's a small school.
Very small school.
Right.
But also, when you think about it, both are fairly methodical, and you have to go step by step to follow procedures to make anything work, because I'm primarily a baker, not a cooker.
I'm with you. I was going to say, I would say that,
like bakers in the house.
My husband would not say that cooking is methodical, but I would.
It's a science. Cooking is a science, not an art. We have that battle all the time.
Yes, absolutely. You got to follow that recipe, and there are instructions for that. So I've been a special educator for 20 years. So my background is special education teacher. I taught in the public schools in Chicago for 15 of those, and I taught students with more significant disabilities. I really was interested in transition and upper grades. So when we moved here to Texas, I found Gateway Academy, which is where I am right now, and kind of entered as a general teacher and saw some issues. Our population is students with autism and ADHD and social emotional and anxiety and all these things. And we saw so much anxiety connected to technology addiction, and students that just didn't understand the social impact of what they were doing online. So I brought up to my head of school that we really needed to teach digital citizenship. And she said,
Digital Citizenship. What a great title.
I love that title.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And no one had really heard of it before. And she said, that's a great idea. You should do it.
Don't you love it when the universe gives you exactly what you asked for?
I did. Exactly came out of my mouth. And so I did. So I created a class on digital citizenship. And there, once you start looking, there's actually a lot of material out there that's already made, ready to go, because there is some funding connected to the government for technology for public schools, connected to having some sort of digital citizenship curriculum taught in the schools. So if you look for it, the materials are there.
Okay.
Well, maybe that's a place to start. It's just like even describing what the heck does digital citizenship mean?
And what should it include?
And what should it include, right?
All right, I got this. So my favorite example of this is I talk about driving a car. So think about driving a car and all the things that we do in our country to make sure that people will be able to drive a car. It is modeled from a very young age that adults drive cars. They use cars responsibly to do things.
Hopefully.
Ideally.
Point A to point B. They show their children the right way. Children are there while parents are driving. It's instilled in them from a young age that this is something that adults do, and you have to be responsible to be able to do it. And that when you're old enough, you will then be able to do this. So children are given, cars as toys, and they're able to play and interact with them in different ways. And so then once they get older, then you have to take a class. You have to learn all about the car and driving the car and the rules of the road. And then you have to take a test and pass that test. You have to pass a written test, and you have to pass a practical test. And so then, even then, most people don't just give children the keys to the car and say, go for it, right? There's still usually some sort of introductory level of, being watched and driving with other people. And, once you really are trusted, then you can drive that car independently and be responsible. I would argue that the internet is the most adult place that anyone can be. And we do none of that when we are introducing our children to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to it's a minor rabbit hole, but as I was listening to you describe all the steps of teaching kids to drive, I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if we did that for parents?
Yeah, no kidding.
Helping people parent. There are countries that actually do that.
Yes.
Consciously. Anyway, sorry, I just had to get that.
No, absolutely.
Well, and a shout out to the parents that are trying to fill the gaps and do some of this themselves, because it is, yes, generally we don't do this stuff. And I know you parents out there are hungry for tools and tips, and you're already trying mightily to do what you can to raise, tech savvy, internet savvy, smart kids. So
absolutely. Sorry for that derailment, but go ahead.
No, absolutely. So absolutely. And there are people that are doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing, but the majority of people don't even give it a second thought that the internet is a place for adults and not children, and that we should really do some teaching around it. Most people give their 2-year-old a phone or a tablet, and statistics say that number of under 4 has gone up like 40% that have access to their own device, right? So it's not that this is just a family device. This is like they have their own device as a tablet. And unless you are savvy enough to set up restrictions or set up a child-friendly environment on that tablet, they can still get online. My favorite example is the child that spent like $5,000 in 20 minutes on Smurf points. So and things like that happen. Yeah. Things happen like that really quickly because you just tap, and there's no connection to the reality. So if the parent has their Apple ID with a credit card number attached to it and it's connected in the game, like there's no connection between Smurf points and dollars to a child that don't understand money yet.
Yeah. So we hear a lot of parents coming to us with concerns because they're trying to figure out, how do I work through getting my kid to pay back the thousands of dollars they inadvertently spent or didn't even realize they were spending, or, all the implications.
Yes, it's huge. It really is. And the answer really is to start out thinking that the device has to be heavily restricted and made into a child-friendly environment. And it's starting it out before they get a device of their own, not giving them the device and then trying to take it away and then add restrictions, because now they've experienced that freedom. And why would I ever want to go back to this brick of a device? I'm going to try and get around all your restrictions because I already had that experience and knew that freedom, and I really want that again.
There's kind of two directions I want to go, because one is for parents of younger kids, like, what are some of the restrictions? What are the things you need to be worried about? What do you not need to worry about? That sort of stuff. And a lot of our parents have kids that are in that in-between stage where they're like buckled down with restrictions, but their kids want to have more agency and more control. And it's this sort of, how do I move from me being in charge of technology use to my kid partnering with me to be in charge of technology use? And so I don't know, maybe we just talk about both those things.
Great. Let's start with the starting off with a highly restricted device. And I would say, so we use Apple products here at our school. And I have found that though not the easiest, they do have the options available to set up the parental restrictions on the devices. The one tip I usually tell people is to really watch out when there is an update to a device, because the updates to a device can sometimes wipe out all of the restrictions that you have put in place. So maybe not having automatic updates scheduled for a child's device, and so that you are the one that go in and update it and double check to make sure those restrictions are still in place. And really, if you go to Apple's website and you Google parental restrictions, they have a really lovely list of information for you to follow. If you're looking for a third-party app, the one I recommend the most is Bark to our families. And Bark recently came out with a phone. It's an Android, not an Apple. But Apple doesn't give people the ability to really third-party control a device. So if you have an Apple device, you have to go through Apple's parental restrictions to set things up. If you have a different device, then Bark does a really great job with that.
Is that BARK?
Yes.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, that's the one that I recommend the most to our families. And a lot of them, once their child has had a lot of really awful experiences or significant consequences, that is what they go to. They sign up for a Bark subscription and they purchase a Bark phone, and that seems to be really helping. And go ahead.
And I guess what's coming up is, can we talk a little bit about some of the language you would use with the younger kid to say, why are we, you've got stuff set up? Is it about safety? Is it about, what's it about? I mean, what's the conversation at that age?
So I really talked a lot about learning to be a citizen of the digital world. Okay, so we are going to learn the skills on how to manage our time, how to manage a balanced life where we're using our devices and then we're also having some time in the real world. How are we using our devices? Are we using them passively? Are we scrolling through things? Are we playing simple games, or are we actively using tools? So are we using things to create and make new content and share those with family and friends? And so really looking not so much at what's happening and how long it's happening, but the quality of what's happening with the device. And
so you're really educating kids on all the different things it can do, sort of in that larger context, so that they're more conscious of, when am I creating, when am I socializing, et cetera, when am I competing, et cetera.
Right. The consumption, the blind consumption of, things that are online, whether it's just watching YouTube video after YouTube video or scrolling through TikTok or any other social media platform and looking at reels, that's passive use. And that is what, really can damage people's self-esteem and the way they think about themselves and others, because they don't really have a connection to any of those things. Do you want to make a video? Great. You want to, you have an idea for something that you want to make a music video. Let's find all the tools necessary to make that. But let's not just passively consume other people's media, because that's not healthy for us.
Okay. Oh, exclusively. I mean, everything in moderation. Everything
is a balance. You want to see what other people are doing, but you're not going to spend hours and hours doing that. You have to have that balance. And then, connections in real life. We know the data is telling us that teens especially value in-person connection less than they did before.
Well, and what's coming up for me as you're saying that, it's this sort of conscious use. It's this sort of, yes, I'm looking at TikTok. Why? Is it because it's because I'm bored and I want something to do with my time? It's because I'm interested in seeing what everybody else is doing and I love watching funny cat videos. It's this sort of awareness.
Is it because I'm learning something? Is it because I'm avoiding something? Right? There are a million reasons.
Right. Are you watching tutorials on something? That's fantastic. Right. Are you doing something with puppies and kittens and animals to really make you happy at the end of the day? Or are you really just, it doesn't matter what comes up on that screen, you're just going to watch it and scroll to the next one? Mm-hmm. So just really being mindful about how we're consuming the information that comes from whatever it is that our tablet or anything that we're being exposed to.
I think a lot of adults, we need that too,
Oh yeah. I mean, I have timers and restrictions on all of my devices. So at, when I need to be going to bed, that pops up at 9 p.m. that my wind down bedtime is coming up, and it closes a ton of apps for me. And I go, oh, okay, I really need to disconnect, because you get so caught up in it.
Can you share that app with me? Because I have a 26-year-old who would love it, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's built into your Apple iPhone. If you go into sleep schedule and health, and you can set up when your wake up and down times are, and it just shuts everything down. Obviously, I can override it if
well, that's kind of, I don't know. My brain would like hate that it just like immediately shuts it down. I would want like a 5-minute warning and a 10-minute warning and all that other stuff.
You can do that, I bet.
It kind of is. There's like in 30 minutes, your wind down is coming. And then at, I have it for like 8 o'clock. So at like 7:45, your wind down is coming at 8 o'clock. And then at 8 o'clock, it makes like a little bedtime chime, like do, do, do. And then it like kind of
starts the process.
Takes it down.
That's really cool.
So we've talked a lot about raising our kids' awareness and what the different uses are of technology and becoming mindful consumers of technology.
Yes.
What's next that needs to be discussed?
So I think one of the big things is that level of responsibility. So let's say you start off and you're like, you're only going to have a certain, one social media account, and you're going to have, all these other creator apps. A conversation with, that responsibility and the purpose of technology is definitely a huge piece of it. I have a couple friends that have bought books, and they're like, we're going to read this book together. And when we're done with this book, then you can have access to this technology or this next piece of this next app or something like that. And I'm like, that's a great idea. That's a fantastic. You do that. But that's
really going to work for any kid under maybe the age of 8.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got your young ones that you can really mold and you can really bring into the fold and gradually provide all of this. But it doesn't work if you've handed an open device to a child at 5. Right? You have to start out with those restrictions in place because, like I said before, once you have open access to all the things, you don't want to have restrictions put on you. It feels like a punishment. And then all of your time spent on that device is now related to this punishment that has been put on you. So really being proactive about how things are set up, super helpful.
Well, and I want to highlight what Susan just said, everyone, because it's this, and there's a section of the book that's about this notion of, are you calling it a consequence, but it's really a punishment. And we think we're putting consequences in place based on their behavior. But if they didn't know about it in advance and they didn't expect it was coming, then it's a punishment, and they're going to experience it that way.
Well, and just say, because Elaine, you said the book in our book, The Essential Guide.
There's guide, right? But I mean, this notion that we call it a consequence because we don't want to be punitive, but if we haven't called it out in advance of a behavior, then we're still being punitive from their lens, from their perspective.
Yeah.
Right. If all of their friends have full access to everything and they're the only ones and they had access and then they lost it, every single time they look at that device.
Well, so let's talk about that transition time. That the kids want more agency. You want to be able to get out in the middle of it, and they're going to be going off to college and they aren't going to have restrictions and all this other stuff. How do we transition them from mom or dad or whoever is in charge is controlling everything to free range technology?
Yeah, that's the hardest. And so I have high schoolers right now, and we have a bunch that are still really struggling. And I have to say that a lot of our students that are maybe that have attachment issues of any kind, those are the ones that we struggle with the most, I would say. The ones that really don't understand social boundaries, those are the kiddos that really struggle with that switch the most. And a lot of them really continue to need some sort of oversight.
Well, and kids with executive function challenges that can't self-manage time and all those other things that the technology has been doing for them.
And when you say they have the hardest time, you mean they have the hardest time managing it independently.
Yes, exactly. That's a great descriptor of it. Once they have access to something that they didn't have access to before, it's so exciting, and it gives them so much feedback, and now they can do anything. So now I'm going to reach out and I'm going to chat with all the people that I've ever wanted to chat with. And now I'm up until 1 o'clock in the morning and I'm not getting any sleep, and I'm doing it in the middle of class because, I can. So it's really, those are the kiddos that just need a lot more help and a lot more assistance, and it needs to move slower. So understanding how the kiddos work and what might work for them is really helpful to be proactive, again, about what's going to happen, and knowing that they're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. As long as there's nothing, as long as there are some things in place to keep things from going completely off the rails. So parent check-ins, honest conversations. You can't be the one that's only punitive about technology use. It has to be, especially now they're transitioning into adulthood, right? You're not going to be in charge of them forever. You're going to have an honest conversation,
or also more than one,
and agreements and all that other stuff.
Right.
The example that's coming up from my family, I remember there was this phase in the middle where I changed the controls and I said to my kids, I randomly am going to check the browser history, and I won't talk to you about it unless I see something that's dangerous, and then we'll have a healthy conversation. I'm not going to get mad. And if the browser history is ever deleted, we're going to have the same conversation. So it's that sort of creating the dialogue about it. And what you said is these kids are going to make mistakes. And I watch parents all the time. They're like, okay, my kid was up until 2 a.m, so I'm shutting them back down and I'm going back to full control. And it's like, that's really not the solution. Right. You want to be able to help them figure out how to be successful and not just say, well, they can't yet, so I'm cutting them off.
Right. A lot, so many kids have time blindness. And once you get sucked into something, I am guilty of staying up and reading a book until, 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And I know that's not healthy, and it's not technology. It's just something I'm really involved in. So those things are going to happen. And so exactly, having those check-ins, having those conversations, having so how did you feel the next day? Well, you were really tired. That really stings. You were really grumpy when you got home too. Do you think that was a great idea?
How'd that work for you? Well, what I love about it is that you're asking questions that raises their awareness, their self-concept, instead of telling them what they should or shouldn't do. Because no amount of telling a teenager especially is going to really do much. But if you ask a question and they answer it for themselves, that's insight, not information.
Well, and as long as you don't come back and say, see, I told you so.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can reference your agreement. Like one of the things we agreed upon was that this was probably a reasonable bedtime. Do you think that that's true going forward? Is this something that we need to adjust and change? Those check-ins about, and again, not I told you so, not like, well, then we're going to have to change this and your bedtime is an hour earlier. No, they're still an adult, and what was the function of what they were doing? Were they chatting with their friends? It's a really normal thing for them to chat with their friends.
Yeah. Right? I had one kiddo that found out that they were staying up till 1 a.m. And when we had the conversation, it was like, my friend is in serious crisis. And I didn't want to leave them. And so knowing that and understanding that you can, let's help that kiddo get help instead of relying on you at 1 a.m. But, you learn a lot more asking questions than you do just taking divisive action, which is what a lot of times
I would say my biggest advice is you have to let go of that control once they become those older teenagers, but you have to do it in a way that is empathetic and continuing to support them. Because like we said, they're going to make mistakes and it's going to happen. And you just have to be there for them when it happens and help lead them to, some things they might be able to change.
Yeah. So for those of you in our community, what Susan's beautifully describing is that transition from director to collaborator and from collaborator to support, right? As we transition our way of parenting and communicating and relating with them, we begin to empower them to take more ownership. So we need to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, it's Elaine. And if you like this podcast, you'll love our coach approach. Whether you're a parent looking for support or a professional supporting families, we invite you to download a free guide with 12 key coaching tools at impactparents.com/gift. You can begin using a coach approach to help kids become more independent or improve all of your conversations at work and at home. That's impactparents.com/gift.
So
go ahead.
Great. So Diane. Susan, as we start to wrap up, what have we not yet talked about that we need to cover?
I wanted to tell everyone that there's another website that I highly recommend for all families called Common Sense Media.
Yes.
Common Sense Media does lovely grading scales and does all these other things for media in general, for games, but they also have a portion called Common Sense Education.
Yeah.
And that is where I use almost all of my curriculum for digital citizenship. And it's a free login. So if you're interested as a parent or as another educator that might be listening to this, don't recreate the wheel. Go use their materials. They're high quality. They have been updated in the last 2 years, and they are available in PowerPoint and Google Slides.
Beautiful. So if I can add to that, and we'll make sure to put all of this in the notes for everybody. One of our early podcasts we interviewed Stephen Falcom from the Online Safety Institute. And so there's an early podcast. We'll link to that. And we've done some summits and created a bunch of resources, have a digital resource guide. So we'll give people links to how they could access our summit from a while back. And we'll brainstorm a little bit to what other resources we feel like you guys could use.
Wonderful.
As well. And we've got Common Sense Media in there.
Well, and resources. So if people want to get in touch with you, Susan.
Yes, I work at the Gateway Academy in Houston, Texas. So if you just Google the Gateway Academy, there's a couple Gateway Academies. So we are the Gateway Academy in Houston, Texas. I am on the website. Also, S. Hoyer at Gateway Academy Houston. You can email me with any questions, comments, concerns. I'm happy to answer any of those as well.
Excellent. So is anything else that you want to make sure, besides the resources, anything else we talked about today that you feel like you want to highlight? Anything we didn't talk about that you want to make sure we cover?
I really want to highlight the use of good modeling of technology from our families. I would say that if you tend to spend your time at the dinner table or in the evening looking at your phone instead of interacting with your child, you're showing them that that's what's okay. And when it comes to social interaction in general, we know that our kids are kind of grappling with a lot of things right now. So that modeling of empathy, that modeling of connectedness, and that modeling of appropriate technology use really is great. Awesome. It's like when they used to say like, oh, my parents, going back to a very old reference, I can't smoke, but my parents smoke 2 packs a day, but so now technology, I have to get off my phone at 8 o'clock, but I know my parents are laying in bed until midnight on theirs. So they see everything. They see the light under the door. They notice what's going on.
Yeah. We like Jamie Lee Curtis's quote that the children are the paparazzi. Oh, yeah. They're going to see you wherever you go, just at the most inopportune moments.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and this is a good opportunity. Truth be told, I've needed a kind of a little bit of a kick to go, okay, let's look at my own relationship with technology and how am I using it? And do I like the balance I've got, or do I want to be doing something different, more consciously? It's a good reminder for all of us. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hear some accountability there, Diane. And for those of you in the community, I'm going to invite you to go to the Lifeline community and check in with Diane and with yourself.
See how she's doing technology. There we go.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm game. Y'all want to send me a note and see how I'm doing?
Yeah,
I'll be good. That's good.
Awesome.
Some timers on, look at one of the things that are available. And there are tons of third-party apps that will shut things down for you. If you find that there's one app specifically that is really like drawing all of your attention, whether it's a game or whether it's a social media app or something like that, you can find something. There's some that like allow you to grow trees in the rainforest for however long you leave your phone down and you don't look at it.
Oh, wait.
One of my kids does that. But then it's like, but I got to water my plants. I mean,
yes. Then you got to get on there again and water the plants.
Right.
But, but if you pay the subscription, they will do a real tree in the rainforest. So, so there's all kinds of things out there that are available to help you with that monitoring of your own self-technology use.
Got it. Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much for what you're doing. It's so nice to know that there are people in schools doing having the really important conversations with kids that you're having. So thank you for what you're doing and for sharing it with our audience.
Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite motto or quote you want to share with our audience?
I do. And I've had this since college. This has been the tagline of almost all of my emails. It's every student can learn, just not on the same day or in the same way. And it's by George Evans.
Beautiful. Every student can learn, not in the same day, on the same way.
Yep.
I love
Everybody's
that.
got their own timeline, and that's okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. And thank you for those of you who are listening. I want to check in before we check out with everybody and remind everybody to take a moment in this moment to think about what's your takeaway from today's episode. What's the insight you've had? Is there something you want to do with that insight to bring it forward with you into the week? Take this one little coaching moment before we wrap to think about what did you get from this conversation and what do you want to do to apply it for yourself in your life? And thanks for everything you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, you make the difference. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast.
Behavior therapy training for parents is actually recommended as a first-line treatment for complex kids. For information about Sanity School, our training program for parents or teachers, which has helped thousands of families around the globe, visit impactparents.com/sanityschool.